Tennessee passed its first shall issue law, which basically means the states decided finally that you had a right to carry a firearm, a handgun, but only if you got a permit. Now, what some of you may know, many will not, is that for years prior to that point in time, Tennessee law said you did not have to have a permit to carry a firearm in Tennessee. You had to carry it openly, and it could only be a military-style handgun. But if you did those two things, you did not have to have a permit in Tennessee. In '94, they sort of changed that, and they said, well, you need a permit. We're not going to just allow you to carry it. That was on the books in May, and I think the House member that carried it was a fellow named Stockburger out of Chattanooga. And it was a disaster. The first permit law was, and it was only on the books for 2 years, because they had a background check requirement, and it was being done by the local sheriffs, and it was taking up to a year to issue handgun carry permits. The sheriff in Williamson County, Tennessee, just south of Nashville where I am, his application was 17 pages, and he did a background check and a credit report on you to issue you a carry permit. Other counties like Nashville, where I was, they issued you permits by weapon. So it looked like a stack of cards when I walked into there because I had to have a different one for every gun. But it got bad, and then in '96, it was so bad, we went back to the General Assembly and we rewrote the carry law. And that's when it transferred to the Department of Safety. Just curious, how many of you have carry permits? I'm glad you're all in front of me again. And so now we have a carry law that is issued by the Department of Safety in Tennessee. Again, keep in mind, this was under an era when the Democrats controlled state government. You know, Jimmy Nafee was the speaker back then. John Wilder was the lieutenant governor. And Democrats passed the carry laws. And they did it because of political pressure. And they did it because it was rural Democrats, rural conservative Democrats, and Republicans joining up against what Nafee wanted and passing it despite him. But here's the thing that bothers me about even the carry law that's on the books now. Tennessee really doesn't view it as a right. They don't even view it as a privilege. There was a clause put on the carry permit law by Representative Bobby Sands. It came out of the House Judiciary. And in Tennessee, do you realize that the state government views your right to carry a firearm as a recreational privilege? That they can revoke if, for example, and this was what Bobby Sands said when he proposed it as an amendment, if you fail to make child support payments, or if you engage in any other of a number of violations that they think should justify revoking privileges. Not rights, but privileges. But the point is, we started off the carry laws in Tennessee under Democrat control, largely conservative Democrats working across the lines with Republicans. And I can tell from looking out there that a lot of you were old enough to vote back in the mid-'90s. And if you recall elections back during that time, at least in my part of the state, it didn't matter if you were running for dog catcher, your campaign literature said you were good on the Second Amendment. Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, it didn't matter. You were good on the Second Amendment. And the Nafee era ran all the way up until about 2008. And in 2008, if y'all recall, the Republicans picked up a little more power. They already controlled the Senate. They thought they had 50 or 51, I forget exactly which, Republicans in the House. And what ended up happening was Kent Williams voted with a block of Democrats and became Speaker when Mumpower thought he was going to have it. And that was during the '09 and '10 era. And in that 2-year window, there was really only one Second Amendment bill that passed in Tennessee. And it was what I call restaurant carry. You remember that? Yeah. And here's what happened with restaurant carry. When I first started doing this, you couldn't carry a gun in any place that sold or served alcohol. And we slowly peeled that back so that if you went into a restaurant or what I call a stop and rob, you could carry in one of those places. And then ultimately the law was still that if it served alcohol, you could not carry in those locations. And the first time we passed the restaurant carry law was in '09, and a judge in Nashville ruled it unconstitutionally vague, and I'll tell you, I frankly agree with her. Because the legislature was so concerned about being politically correct, they wanted to put all these little qualifications on there about what was a restaurant and what wasn't. And so the judge ruled it unconstitutional. And keep in mind, that bill was carried when it passed in '09 by Democrat Senator Doug Jackson and Republican House member Terry Todd. Came back in 2010, and they did the right thing. They just repealed the restaurant law altogether. And so now you can carry in a restaurant in Tennessee. And the only rule is you can't be consuming alcohol while you're doing it, okay? Which is unlike states like Arkansas, where they have a DUI standard. So in Tennessee, my view is now that we now have a restaurant carry law that's what I call designated shooter. But in that 2-year window, that's the only major progress that was made on Second Amendment issues in Tennessee. And then we start campaigning in 2010. And the Republicans are getting excited because they're seeing what the fortune tellers are telling them, and they're going to pick up seats. And it's not going to be a 50-seat margin, or, you know, it's going to be substantially more, and ended up being 64-seat margin for the Republicans. And as we're coming into the 2010 election cycle, Bill Haslam is traveling all over the state. He comes to talk to me a half a dozen times or so. And on video, when he's talking with the Nashville TFA chapter, he commits that if he's elected governor, and this is on video, it's on YouTube, you can find it, it's still there, that he will sign into law in Tennessee, if the bill's put on his desk, constitutional carry. Now, there's only 4 states now in the country that have full-blown constitutional carry, which is a doctrine that says you don't have to have a permit to carry a handgun if you're a citizen of this state. Just the simple fact that you're an adult citizen and you've not been in prison and had your rights restored gives you the right, like carrying a pocket knife, to carry a gun. Now, there's a lot of other states, like Kentucky, that have a modified version of constitutional carry, where they basically say if you want to carry it concealed, you got to have a permit. But if you carry it openly, you don't have to have a permit. But Haslam told us that he would sign that bill into law the minute it was put on his desk if he was elected governor. That's now been 3 years. He has not asked as governor for that bill to be introduced. He has not lobbied for the introduction of that bill, and I suspect he promised he would sign it because he knew it wouldn't get introduced, and he wouldn't ever have to hold that promise to accountability. Getting him to do it and getting these legislators to introduce it is all we're waiting on. Now, what else has happened in the last 2 years? Ron Ramsey came to me in 2010 and said, John, we're picking up momentum, we're picking up seats. The Republicans are going to get the General Assembly in full control for the first time since the Civil War. And looking back, I now wonder if there's some reason why establishment Republicans were thrown out of state government control for the last 150 years. And I think the reason is it's establishment Republicans and not constitutional Republicans. But Ron Ramsey came to TFA, met me in his office, and he said, if TFA will stand down, because we would typically run 10 to 15 bills a year, if y'all will stand down and let the Republicans do some stuff we need to do because we're getting control, I will make sure that what we call the safe commute law passes in 2010. And so we stood back. We did not ask any legislator anywhere in state government to introduce a bill for TFA in 2010. Ron Ramsey did not even offer the bill, and in fact, he worked against it when it did get introduced. Are y'all familiar with what I call safe commute? Okay. Safe commute is this law. Right now, under Tennessee law, if your employer has a policy that says you cannot have a gun at the workplace, you can be criminally prosecuted fired and terminated for cause if you, with a carry permit, drive to work and leave your gun in your car, which is your personal property. Safe Commute says basically this concept. You own the car. You have a right as the owner of that car to leave anything in it, anywhere you park it, so long as you legally own or possess the item. That's important because when FedEx testified in 2011 about this law, their testimony was in the Senate Judiciary hearings that as far as they were concerned, since they owned the land, they could ban Bibles from your car if they wanted to. And it's not a property, well, it is sort of a property rights issue. That's the biggest argument I hear. What FedEx and big business and even a lot in government fail to recognize is by law since 2008 in Tennessee, your car is an extension of your home and you can store anything in it you want to. The same legal doctrine that says you can shoot somebody when they come in your house lets you, because of carjackings, have the same legal presumptions if they try to bust into your car and carjack you. So TFA takes the position, if it's your car, you ultimately get to decide what you store in it, not your employer. But there's a majority in the state legislature. And frankly, it's a majority in the state Republican caucuses in the legislature because the Democrats don't have a vote to matter anymore that don't agree with that. But Ramsey promised us that bill in 2010. I still have the text messages on my phone where he promised it again in 2011. Now, what happened in 2011? In 2011, the bill got all the way to the House floor. And you know why it didn't get voted upon? Because a majority of the Republicans on the House floor moved to table the bill, which means basically kill it. When Representative Eddie Bass, who's a retired sheriff from Giles County, and he happens to be a Democrat, made a motion on the floor asking that the bill be made mandatory instead of permissive. Because the bill that Representative Josh Evans from Robertson County was running in 2011 said employers may allow people to park in the parking lots. And if they do so, they're immune if something goes wrong. There was no mandate, there was no requirement. It was no law because it wouldn't do anything. A majority of House Republicans, with some Democrats, voted to table the bill, which killed it. Now, following that, we met with with House Republican leadership in the summer of 2011. The people we met with were Gerald McCormick, Deborah Maggart, Tony Shipley, and it may have just been those three. And here's what we were told as gun owners in the state. Deborah Maggart told me, now Deborah and I were high school classmates. She was a year ahead of me, but it's a school of 90 students per class, so it was like everybody's the same. Deborah Maggart was number 3 in the House Republican Party. And she told me this sitting in her office. She said, John, the Republican Party doesn't want any gun bills to come to the floor in 2012. We don't want any Second Amendment legislation. And she said, because we think Second Amendment issues are bad for Republicans in this state. Which amazed me because the whole time they were in the minority under Jimmy Nafa's era, they were all about the Second Amendment. But she was concerned that if gun bills were promoted by the Republican caucuses in 2012, her terminology was, I want to view every gun bill as if it was on a Democrat piece of campaign literature, and is that going to help us pick up a supermajority or is it going to hurt? And what you saw in 2012 was the Republican House leadership and Lieutenant Governor Ramsey do everything they could to keep safe commute laws off the floor of the General Assembly. They did not even want to have members of the party vote on the bill, much less pass it into law. And what that told me as of 2012 was that we have a group of legislators, not all of them, to be certain, not all of them. But we have a group of legislators, and unfortunately some of them are in leadership, that view the Second Amendment and your right to defend yourself and your family and your right to resist government when it gets out of control as a partisan issue, as a wedge issue, and not as a fundamental right of the citizens of this state and this country to be the ultimate arbiters of government.
Bad news right there.
Now, the parking lot bill is running again this year, and the NRA is supporting it. And I'll tell you now, I'm an NRA referral attorney. I do a lot of work for the NRA. I represent a lot of NRA members. But the NRA is wrong about supporting the parking lot bill this year. And I'll tell you why, if you don't already know. The parking lot bill that's running this year, that has flown through the Senate like it was on the wings of an airplane, and is flying through the House, does practically nothing to protect you as a citizen in this state. They will tell you it will keep you from being criminally prosecuted if this law passes. And the fact is, it will keep you from being criminally prosecuted under 3 specific statutes. It will not keep you from being criminally prosecuted under the state preemption statute for any local ordinances that were grandfathered prior to 1986. It will not keep you from being criminally from being criminally prosecuted under Tennessee's criminal trespass statutes, because neither one of those statutes are specifically referenced in the bill that's running. If that bill passes and you rely on it, you could potentially be criminally prosecuted, notwithstanding what they're telling you. The other problem with the bill is it does nothing to protect you from an employer policy that says no guns on our business. If this law passes and you as a permit holder try to rely on it, and your employer like FedEx has a policy that says no guns in our parking lots, you will be fired, and you will be fired for cause, which means you will have no employee benefits. You will not even get unemployment benefits. In my mind, that's not a good bill. I would rather say no thank you to a half attempt than to accept something that has serious flaws in it. And I'll tell you something else that makes me really suspicious about what leadership's doing on this particular bill. This is the 5th year this bill's been running. FedEx, Volkswagen, Bridgestone, the State Chamber of Commerce, they have fought that legislation viciously. UT Knoxville and Vanderbilt have fought that legislation viciously for the last 4 years. There is no material opposition from big business to this bill this year. And they don't need to oppose it because they're not giving up anything. They're not being told that your employees have a right and you can't infringe it to safely commute back and forth to work. If this bill passes the way it's written, citizens in this state will have to make the choice whether their job or their life safety is more important. And that's not a position we ought to be put in if we've got good constitutionally based legislators looking after our interests. And it bothers me that although we have told every legislator in writing that's voted on this bill so far about these holes in the legislation, that not a one of them have brought that issue up on the public record. There have been no amendments offered. There have been no hard questions asked, with the limited exception of Representative Sherry Jones, a Democrat out of Nashville, who questioned the House sponsor, Jeremy Faison, about the bill. And like the gentleman said earlier, that's on video, it's on the internet, and Faison, standing at the podium in the Civil Justice Subcommittee, said, you can be fired if this law passes. It's not a secret. They just don't want to stop it. And you got to ask why. So, that's the basic history, legislatively, of the Second Amendment over the last 20 years in the Tennessee General Assembly.